Hey guys, okay, so I wanted to start a YouTube about, I guess, my life and how I'm navigating borderline personality disorder, how I'm navigating my symptoms, how I'm understanding the disorder, how I'm navigating no contact with my parents, how I'm dealing with a breakup with my FP and navigating that situation, and I guess just a little bit more about me and my life in general. So to get started, my name is Haley. I am 26 years old. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder at 23 years old. I do want to break it down. I want to start from when I was 20. So when I was 20, I had gotten sober from alcohol. I had been a very heavy drinker from 12 years old to 20. And by 20 years old, I had started to notice that there was a big problem. I had gotten fired from my job one day when I went in drunk. And the next day, I had admitted myself to detox as I knew there was a problem and something had to stop. So I went to detox for about 3 to 4 weeks and I learned a lot about alcoholism. I had a numerous amount of time to get sober and get healthy, eat well, and learn about myself. It was a very good experience for myself. It was something I needed. I needed that time to get sober, and I don't feel like I personally would have got sober if I didn't get away from home, as my parents were heavy drinkers. So I stayed at detox for a while, got sober. I wasn't intending on going to rehab as that was just not something I felt I could afford at the time. So I wanted to navigate sobriety on my own. So I went home to live with my parents. However, again, they were very heavy drinkers. So it was very difficult to navigate living with them. When I lived with them, they would ask me to get them beer, to get them wine, and it was just a constant pattern. And it was driving me into a very deep hole that I felt I couldn't get out of. When I got sober, I had gone to 60 for 60, which is 60 AA meetings in 60 days. I went to AA and I felt that I fit in. I found kind of my place. However, something was still off and I didn't really connect with the programming, more so the people. So I started to understand that it was just not for me. And after 60 meetings, I did not attend again. It was just not for me. However, I do feel proud of myself for actually trying it, as I felt that I wouldn't have known I didn't like it if I didn't try it. That being said, so I did that and I was still living with my parents at the time. They were living in Cambridge, Ontario. And at that time, I was about a year and a half into sobriety, and my parents had decided that they were going to move to New Brunswick. So the plan was I was going to move to New Brunswick with them, and we were just going to, start our lives there. I would go to school, navigate things from that point on. When I went to, speak to my parents about this about a couple weeks before they were going to move, they had changed their minds and told me that they didn't want me to go anymore. So at that point, I was freaking out. I was in Cambridge. I had no idea what I was going to do. I had $5 in my pocket, and my parents weren't providing any money to me at that time. They still never were as an adult. So it was very difficult to try to navigate that on my own. However, once my parents left, I did move in with my partner and became super codependent. I moved from Cambridge, Ontario to Mississauga, Ontario. So I did have more resources here, but it was a very new environment for me. I was familiar with Mississauga, but it wasn't home at that time. I never really had a home as I did move so frequently. So once I got here, I started to rebuild my life and try to navigate how I was gonna basically get on my feet again. And my parents had moved away. We had kind of kept in contact. Things were fine, but there was constantly like push and pull. We would fight and make up. And we would have some time away and then talk again. It was just constantly a pattern. I went to my parents' house around Christmas time, and I realized that things were not going well. We got in a huge fight. I was supposed to stay for a week. I only stayed for a couple days and flew back. At that point, I realized there was no relationship with my parents that was working out. I was extremely sad every time I was around them, and it was just bringing me down and really stunting my growth. I felt as though I was not going anywhere. I was just constantly taking step backwards around them. So at that point, I had realized that I have exhausted all avenues. I have tried to set boundaries. I have tried to go no contact for numerous amounts of months, and that still didn't work. We still went back to the same pattern. So I felt that at that point, I did have to go to no contact, as nothing else was working with them at that point. Okay, so that being said, I went no contact with my parents around the same time that I did get diagnosed. So to talk about my diagnosis, When I was 23, I had realized, that things were not going well. I was extremely push and pull with everyone in my life. I was cutting everyone off. I was just very turmoil relationships. I didn't know what was going on. I had a lot of dysfunction in my life, even still after getting sober. So I couldn't really understand what was going on. So I went to my grandfather's house one day, and this was in the time that I was still talking to my family. And I had talked to my grandfather and discussed the topic of taking my own life. And after that conversation, my grandfather had told me that he's never had thoughts like that, to which I was extremely shocked because my mom had always told me that everybody thought this way. So in my mind, having these thoughts was completely normal, and it was a part of being a normal human. I didn't realize that the severity of me having these thoughts every day and over very small inconveniences was in fact not normal. It was very common for borderline, but at the time I did not know that it was normal or common in my life. And so at that time I had realized that something was really wrong, and I realized I needed to get help because I felt that I did not want to be here all the time. So at that point I had went home, set up an appointment to get a psych evaluation, to get a diagnosis. At that point I got a psych evaluation and everything was very well. I figured out, a lot about myself within, it was a 6-hour meeting. I navigated everything within my life. I talked about my childhood, my adolescence, everything in between. And it was really difficult to really talk about that. It was a very long meeting. It was very heavy. But at the end of that, I got diagnosed with social anxiety and borderline personality disorder and body dysmorphia. And when I had that initial appointment, I had felt confident with my diagnosis. I met all 9 criteria of borderline personality disorder. I had never heard of this disorder before that in my life. And when I found that out, I knew that this was the disorder that I did have, and this was going to change my life for the rest of my life. Many things that I went through in my life were completely explained by borderline personality disorder, and it was extremely helpful for me to understand those things. That being said, I got diagnosed then. I did not feel that I had social anxiety, so I did see another psych who again diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder, all 9 criteria, and diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder and not social anxiety disorder and body dysmorphia. I was extremely happy to find out what was going on in my life. And at that point, I went home and had told my mom about borderline personality disorder. I was extremely excited. I had known that I really wanted to tell them about this. And, I finally was excited to let them know that, I'm not crazy like you guys tell me all the time, like something's going on. I knew it was. And they basically didn't care. I would send them articles. They wouldn't even read them. I would constantly talk about this and like how symptoms related to things in my life. They wanted nothing to do with it. And it was very difficult for me to deal with having extremely unsupportive parents while going through that, because it changed my entire life and I couldn't understand why they weren't understanding that, or understanding that finally their daughter had answers. I don't know why they weren't extremely happy about that, and that's what consumed my life. At that point, I had really exhausted all avenues trying to get them to understand information, so I stopped. That is when I went to go visit them, and I realized that our relationship was not working and we had to go no contact. At that point, I did go no contact with the rest of my family, as it was not working. When I had gotten diagnosed with borderline personality disorder at 23 years old, I felt that my entire life finally had answers. And to know that my family was never there for me and had actually defended my emotional abusers in my life was very hurtful. I had to know that I was going to be okay. Navigating no contact with my parents was a lot easier with a partner. Navigating no drinking was a lot easier with a partner that didn't drink. So there were a lot of aspects of my life that really helped me. In terms of getting sober, now that I'm sober and I don't drink, I have a lot of changes in my life. Alcohol really heightened my borderline symptoms in terms of my impulsivity, in terms of anything to do with my behavior. Everything was heightened. Now that I'm sober, I have not so much mental fog. I can see things in a better light. I can understand how to get to a wise mind perspective quicker. And I'm just learning a lot about myself. I will be 6 years sober on April 7th, 2022, which is coming up very soon in like a week. So that's very exciting. And I am almost 27 years old, so I'm still very young navigating this. So it's very new. There are still times where I feel extremely uncomfortable because I do not drink. And I will talk about that more in videos going forward. But today I did just kind of want to touch light on the fact that I didn't even hear about borderline until I did get diagnosed. These symptoms I started noticing, I would say the youngest is being 9. That's the youngest I can remember wanting to take my own life. I cannot remember my life prior to that very much. There are times that I do remember that come here and there, but I do have a lot of confusion in those aspects of my life and feel I have suppressed a lot of memories. So there's a lot that I just cannot remember from my childhood. However, I do remember the youngest I have had suicidal thoughts being 9, and my teen years were chaos. I will get more into my teen years and specific parts of my life. However, I did kind of want to touch that I did notice borderline very young in my age. I did not get diagnosed until I was in my 20s. It was very difficult for me to navigate. And I also didn't learn about borderline until I was older. So that being said, I just kind of want to give more education on borderline so that people can understand themselves and maybe direct themselves towards getting a diagnosis if borderline is something they feel they have, because living with borderline personality disorder is extremely tough. And it's extremely tough navigating that on your own, because when you understand borderline, you start to understand yourself a lot better. And it's hard when you can't understand yourself and you're already struggling, say with a sense of identity. It can be very difficult to understand yourself. So once you understand that you have, say a struggle with your identity, then it can be easier to navigate life, because I don't feel so lost now because I know parts of things that I do relate to my borderline. That being said, I did just want to kind of make an intro video, you guys, this week. I will be posting every Thursdays and Mondays going forward. Every week will be a different topic. I will, again, talk about FPs, breakups, no contact, all that fun stuff. But thank you guys so much for watching my video. Thank you for being here. And thank you for staying in this world when you felt you no longer could, because that in itself is strength. So I'll see you at the next video, guys. Thank you.